So my name is Nikki Adams. I'm from the English Collective of Prostitutes and the Global Women's Strike. This is a panel, the Global Women's Strike Experience. It's the second event in a series of events to mark the 50th anniversary of the International Wages for Housework campaign throughout 2022. And to launch our archives in this beautiful building and location, the Bishopsgate Institute. And the Wages for Housework campaign started in 1972 and continues to organise in the UK and internationally. Since 2000, it has coordinated the Global Women's Strike, which has groups in Canada, in India, Ireland, Peru, Thailand, the UK and the US. Before I move to the panel, I would like to ask Selma James to say a few words of introduction. Selma is the founder of the Wages for Housework campaign. She first put forward that demand at the Second Women's Liberation Conference in Manchester in 1972, and since then she's been a point of reference for this global network and for the autonomous organisations which formed within the Wages for Housework campaign, some of which are represented here today alongside the network of men who share this perspective. Selma. Woo.
Thank you very much for coming today. It's really hard to know what to say after 50 years. The first thing about it is that we had no idea, at least I had no idea, when I put forward Wages for Housework in 1972, that it was going to completely throw my life not out of kilter, but into kilter. And it was a lot of work with a lot of people who mattered more and more as we worked together. We mattered to each other, but I want to make clear we never formed a club which would prevent us from letting the rest of the international into it. We had to work out our relationships so we could call each other on what we disagreed with and work out our problems, but at the same time be accountable, entirely accountable, that we could rely on each other for all kinds of things, including for helping us when we made mistakes. I want to begin by talking, first of all, about what we accomplished. I'm not going to speak very long. Look at this panel. You can hardly wait for it. We don't have wages for housework. Well, that doesn't mean we're a failure. It means the fight is very fundamental to the society, so that asking for wages for women and for all those who are unwaged is so revolutionary that we have to take on every single aspect of the society which is dominated by capitalism and change it. And that's rather a big job, and it took over 50 years to begin. But we have made a lot of changes, and I want to point only to one. This 10 years that is being handed over today of archives has within it a witch hunt that was really very fierce against us. And now that we're looking over the thing, we discovered that we thought the witch hunt was just about racism and something to do with politics. But what we were really fighting was for Greenham Women's Peace Camp to stay non-aligned. And we stood with Yellowgate for non-alignment, and the Communist Party and its various supporters were for Greenham not to be non-aligned, but to be aligned with the Soviet Union. And they were racist, against the woman from our campaign, Wilmette Brown, from Black Women for Wages for Housework, who led our non-alignment struggle alongside of Yellowgate, in particular alongside the leadership at Yellowgate, which was a nurse who had become a campaigner who was from Scotland, and she was absolutely determined on non-alignment and on anti-racism. But what was important to know about it, aside from these important facts, was that racism, they were racist. But that was not the problem. The problem was that they decided that the best weapon against non-alignment was racism. And they attacked Wilmette. They didn't attack any other one of us. They attacked Wilmette because they thought that would attract the rest of the women at the other gates of Greenham Common Women's Peace Camp to the cause that they were espousing, which was, let us align with the Soviet Union. And we beat them. We beat them. It stayed non-aligned. The person who knew this best was not here, although she often lived at Greenham Common from Ireland, Margaretta Darcy, who wrote the piece in a book called Awkward Corners with her husband and really great playwright and novelist, and in general a great writer, John Arden. They wrote a book together, and Margaretta in that book wrote a piece called Awkward Corners, outlining the struggle that we had made. The response to those who had wanted alignment was to prevent the book from being published. And there was a great struggle through the courts, and Margaretta was having fun. She knew that we beat them, and she wanted the chance to beat them. And of course, we did beat them, and the book was finally published, but it was not widely reviewed because there were a lot of forces in the society, not only racist ones, not only sexist ones, not even only non-aligned ones, not only aligned ones, but people who didn't think that women should be making a struggle about alignment or about anything else without the help, in quotes, of men. The sexism was very deep. The, what is the word where you own something? The ownership, yes. The ownership of politics was men's. And they were very happy to oppose us, or even better, not even to mention us. But we did win. The women at Greenham Yellowgate, they knew they had won, and they went on to make Greenham a non-aligned women's peace camp, which was also deeply anti-racist. And you either liked it or you hated it, but it existed. So that's one of our struggles, which we don't know a lot about outside of a very particular set of people. But the archives are going to help greatly to advertise and really to begin to see how much history is made, as Mark said, behind our backs. That is, we make our own history, but we're not sure we're making it, or we don't even know we're making it as we make it. But the archives are a place to find out the history that we are making, as well as the history we have made. And we're very happy to offer that to people who want to know about the history of the last 50 years, and of women and anti-racism and much else in particular. Finally, I want to speak to the women who cannot be here because they've left us. The first of those was Bernadette Marage, who died, I don't know how many years ago. You know, when you're doing the thing, you don't know what year it is. You just say, it's next year, when it was last year, and that kind of thing. And Bernie is in our film, All Work and No Pay, and she was a marvelous presence. She starred in that film. She couldn't help, the nurse that she was, of being a carer and being a benign feeling when you were with her, that she was for life and for you. Bernadette was a wonderful mother as well, and her children loved her greatly. And when she went, we were enormously sad. The second person was Clotilde Walcott. She was a factory worker, a chicken factory in Trinidad, a tremendous organizer, a writer, and in general, a sense of history which she found in living. She was not a great reader, and she was the one who found the phrase, the global kitchen, as a way of describing what we were doing and how and where and with whom we were doing it. And we lost Clotilde, and we knew we had lost not only a great organizer, but a woman who was the one who inspired the first legislation in the world for counting women's unwaged work, and that was in Trinidad and Tobago. And we loved her greatly, and she was a fantastic person. We didn't see her often because the distance was great, but we always kept the bond between us and the help flowing both ways. The third person was Ruth T. And I got this ring from Ruth T, and I wore it today to remember her again, but in fact, I don't need reminders. Ruth was a woman who was a mother and whose husband worked for a big company, and Ruth was a soft-spoken Texan, but she could give you a piece of her mind. And at one point, just I tell you one story about her, Ruth's husband was sacked, and you know, in the business world, they don't have too much emotion. You know, they don't have any, well, I'll give you a chance. No, they're very brutal among each other, especially in the hierarchical arrangement. And they sacked her husband for no reason. And she went to see them, and she gave them a piece of her mind, and when she left, he had his job back. How she acted, this soft-spoken Texan just knew how to do it, and she was fiercely for wages for housework. She was not poor, she had been, but she was not poor. They had a good standard of living, but that's not what mattered when she wanted wages for housework. It was her money that she wanted. It was her right, and it was her affirmation of power in the world as well as in the family, which for her was summed up by the demand for wages for housework. And so many of us learned well from her about how to express our own needs in all those directions.
Laurie.
Laurie. Laurie was the nurse, and she became a homeopath. And she was a great lesbian advocate, a strong campaigner for lesbian and gay rights, who arranged for, what is the man?
Chelsea Manning.
Yes, for Chelsea Manning to be the hero of the march in San Francisco, which was supposed to be dedicated to corporations.
Gay Pride.
Pardon?
Gay Pride.
Gay Pride. And Gay Pride celebrated the life of Chelsea Manning, mainly because of Laurie's leadership. But that's not the only great thing that we remember her for. She called me once and said, look, you know, I was thinking of going to Guyana and giving them an education, a quick education on homeopathy, because they're having a lot of trouble with their health. And it would be good, you know, she'd been giving instructions by phone and by Skype, and she said, I think I'd like to tell them about it. And I said, fine, and she organized to go, and she spent a month with them, with the group, training the mothers about what was good for this childhood disease and that, and what could be useful with this, and how you judge what remedy. And she gave them a kind of ongoing course in homeopathy, which served them very well for a lot of years. And she never thought much about it, but we never even gave her an honorary degree in homeopathy or in anything else. We took it for granted. That was part of the political work that she had decided to do, and we were happy that the Guyanese organization, which had another Crossroads Women's Center, that was the second Crossroads Women's Center, was in Georgetown, Guyana. We were delighted that that was a homeopathy center too. And then finally, we lost Andai. That was about 1.5 years ago. And she was the point of reference of Red Thread in Guyana, thank you, which had done so much good work. And Andai was a wonderful woman who was central to our winning the decisions which were so important in Beijing in 1995, where we succeeded in getting governments to agree that women's unwaged work should be measured and valued and enter into the national statistics of every country. Of course, whether they do it or they don't, it is terribly important for them to at least know they should be doing it, and it gives women in every country a lever to get it from their own governments. And the way Andai helped was that she was in the CARICOM, Caribbean Commission delegation, and then she just took it upon herself to organize the breakout meeting of governments. And when they made suggestions for the resolution which we were backing, she said no. That's all she said. No, she wouldn't help it. Until after having sent the messages out and getting the messages back from those of us outside, because we couldn't go into the government conference, when we said, this one is okay, she came back and told them, yes, that will do. And they passed it. And when the breakout group passed it, the whole group backed it. They didn't want to rock the boat or do anything. And we got that resolution passed, and millions of women had signed a petition asking for that. So that was an additional reason for governments to back it. And we got a tremendous decision from the UN that day, because Andai just took it upon herself to represent all the governments of the West Indies. And they were afraid, because it was so successful, they were afraid to deny that she had the power. So we won from that. And we miss her for a lot of reasons. including that she wrote a wonderful book that she finished, an anthology that she finished just before she died of cancer. And we don't have a copy to show you today because we're badly organized. But you'll have to forgive us because we have 1,000 copies if you really want them. And that can be arranged. So these are the people that we lost who helped to make this day, and we have to call their names and welcome them to the archives because they belong here, they're here, and they will always be here.
Presente!
Thank you, Selma. That's really a fantastic way to remember our history, including through the people that we have loved and lost. I'm going to make you wait before the panel because I want to introduce Anne Neal, who's just going to say a few words about the locating of our archives in this beautiful building.
Thanks, Nikki, and we'd like to say thanks so much to all the people at Bishopsgate who've really welcomed us and are so enthusiastic to have our archives, which is really wonderful. And of course, being able to be here in this lovely building is fantastic. I'm sure we've all got secret longings to be able to come and sit quietly and do our work and just enjoy the surroundings. So thank you to Bishopsgate. So why are we doing archives? So once we started talking about the fact that it was 50 years this year since Selma started the campaign, we realised that of course we must celebrate. Among other things, there aren't many, if any, grassroots women's organisations that are not only have survived 50 years but are growing and continue to get stronger. But also because over the past several years we've got increasingly annoyed and sometimes quite angry about the fact that our history was being rewritten by academics, and we kept hearing the same refrain that Wages for Housework started in the early 70s, but it passed away in 1977. Okay, it was finished in 1977. And of course, we knew that wasn't true because here we are. But there wasn't enough ocular proof to show these academics and various pimps who wanted to claim our early history but wanted nothing to do with the 45 years after some of them left when there was a split on race, that they were completely wrong. So getting our archives together and putting them in the public domain seemed an obvious solution. Having said that, most of us knew very little about archiving, although the English Collective of Prostitutes already had their archives here. So our aim is to have the whole of the 50 years finished by the end of this year. In March we launched the first 10 years, which are already online here, and today we've got the next decade -1 because 1991 didn't quite get finished for various reasons, but never mind. So Selma talked about the 80s, and I won't repeat what she said, but just to say the 80s were a very busy time. There was a lot going on, including the occupation of the Church of the Holy Cross, which the ECP did, which will be celebrating its 40th anniversary in November. So just to say, two things which have really stood out from looking at the old stuff, which I've been doing. One is how clear and determined our politics were from the very beginning, which is thanks to Selma, of course. But it does mean that looking at some documents from the 70s, unlike what you might do if you looked at diaries from that period and think, oh my God, how could I have said that, or how could I have thought that? No, you don't look at the documents and think that. You think, wow, that was really good. We were really, on course. And yes, many things have developed, but we've got a lot to be proud of from that time. And the other thing is really confirmation that it's really important to know our own history. And as Selma was talking about the attacks in the 80s, the attacks started in 1972 when Selma first introduced Wages for Housework, and we've been discussing those among ourselves. And several of the women who are much newer to the campaign have said how crucial it was to them to find out that history. And also a young woman who I'm sure is actually very knowledgeable and generally very well informed asked me the other day, what's Greenham? And I had to explain to her what Greenham Common Women's Peace Camp was all about. And that, you know, it's not a reflection on her that she didn't know, it's a reflection on how much our movements are really hidden from history and hidden from ourselves. And we can't let that happen, which is why we're busy archiving. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Anne. Okay, so now it's my great pleasure to introduce this panel. The first speaker is the Global Women's Strike Experience, and the first speaker is Chrissy Amos. Chrissy is from Women of Colour in the Global Women's Strike, but also from Global Women Against Deportations, which is a coalition of groups based at the Crossroads Women's Centre that fight against deportation. And she's also from Women Against Rape.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you very much. Wait, you haven't heard what I've got to say yet. And before I do say, you know, what brought me to the Wages for Housework campaign, I think it might help if I gave a bit about my background. So I was born in 1950, do the maths, in the second city of Britain, Brum. I'm a mixed-race daughter of immigrants, a German mother and a Nigerian father, who both came to Britain after the Second World War. Up? Okay, sorry. After the Second World War, and worked to build the welfare state and the National Health Service in those very early days. When my mum got pregnant with me, my father didn't want to know, so she was under great pressure to have me adopted. She says she changed her mind the minute I was born, when I came out of the womb smiling. So the struggle starts early. I grew up in an all-white family. My mother married a very brutal Englishman. His racism was blatant and unrelenting. My mother lived it too. She never spoke much about it, but I'm sure it was 24/7 work protecting me and my half-brother from my stepfather's violence. He beat me, and he beat him, and he sexually abused me from the age of 7. School was some escape, but not much, as I was the only black kid in an all-white girls' grammar school. Dig that. Smack in the middle of Housework, Birmingham, which is a black area some of you will know, with a great history of riots. I wasn't accepted by my classmates back then. They said, "We don't play with blackies." And teachers didn't expect me to do well, except at sport and bringing trophies back and such. So I rebelled and I bunked off, and I had a great time whenever I could, going down into Soho Road, listening to the latest ska, blue beat and reggae with my mates. Like many young women trying to escape poverty, I ended up getting a boyfriend, and that was why I was at art college. He was white, his parents loathed me. I entered a pretty exploitative and unrewarding marriage, and we went to live in Somerset in the mid-70s. I turned to basketball as an escape. That wouldn't be the natural thing, but that's what I did. And by 1979, I became a very serious National League player. And it opened up a whole new world for me. We played all over the UK, abroad, including in the US. And I started exploring relationships with women. Surprise, surprise, I got divorced. And I met my partner, Carrie, a single mum with 3 young daughters. When I asked her what she did, she said, "I'm in the Wages for Housework campaign." So I said, "What's that?" And when she told me, I said, "I want that." And that's what happened. Carrie and the children and the Wages for Housework campaign were the best things that ever happened to me. They're the loves of my life. By 1985, I joined the campaign, and I'd started coming up to London from Bristol, where we lived. I was fascinated by the idea of wages for housework. We should have money for our unwaged work. It made perfect sense, although I didn't always understand exactly what the campaign stood for or meant. But then I met Selma, and I was bowled over by her because, for many reasons, but because also she was the first person who ever asked me to write down my experiences. Meeting other sisters in Black Women for Wages for Housework was an eye-opener. There was Sarah, still with us, Jasbir, Sylvia, still with us, and Margaret and Will met. We were from so many different backgrounds, and I wanted to be more involved. I thought it was great that there were men involved too, because I'd always had great men friends. It was through them that I met the international sisters, Phoebe Jones in particular from the US, who'd founded the North American Network of Women Runners. And she had this title, Running Out of the Kitchen, which I thought was brilliant. And it had a big impact on me. And I saw the possibility of making the game of basketball, which I loved, available to women and girls in Bristol. And we founded All Nations Women's Basketball as an anti-racist, anti-sexist initiative, which brought together sport and politics, two important parts of my life. We even got Bristol Council to give us free use of the sports centre and pay for childcare. We worked on a lot of local issues. We exposed racism in Bristol's GP services, much more. But our big highlight was campaigning against the building of Hinkley C, Bristol's nuclear power station, where we won an inner city inquiry for grassroots and people of colour to give evidence on the impact of nuclear power on our lives, and on environmental racism, some of our early work against pollution and for climate justice. After several years of travelling up and down to London from Bristol, the obvious thing was for us to move here, and we did. Over the last 30 years, I've jointly coordinated asylum work with Global Women Against Deportations, which Nikki mentioned, and with and when the All African Women's Group came together in 2003, it had a big impact on us. While we'd always done immigration work within Black Women for Wages for Housework, women seeking asylum from rape and other torture were speaking out, and our work became grounded in women's demands for the right to stay and the resources to recover. Being part of Wages for Housework campaign, Global Women's Strike, helped me make sense of my life, what I'd been through, and how that relates to other women from different sectors, and how we can organise to be with, not against each other. We take our autonomy as Black women while refusing separatism, being dismissive or not bothered about other sectors or in competition. Having our own autonomous organisations means we are able to discuss our issues collectively and internationally and work out what campaigns we want and how to overcome the injustices we face. We have each other's backs, while at the same time making sure we do not undermine others or promote our own needs over others. In the 70s and 80s, many people of colour identified politically as Black, but that changed. There were always Indigenous women, Latin American and women from India in our network. So in 2002, we took the name Women of Colour, so that it was clear that as Black Women for Wages for Housework was inclusive, international, and for women of colour of all shades. Being part of an international movement means we can take leadership from people in the global south and put the power that we have in the north at their disposal, in contrast to the NGOs who put themselves and their ambitions front and centre of grassroots people's organising and demands. They hide the movement while pimping off our work. We work with other sectors because that is also who we are. In addition to being women of colour, we're lesbian, disabled, pensioners, sex workers. It's exciting, hard work and intensely rewarding, for example, when a woman wins her status that we've been campaigning with, or compensation for unlawful detention, or reunion of children who they've left behind or whose social services stole from them. Everything I've experienced from being petrified to open my mouth and speak publicly like this, scared rigid at going to an anti-racist conference in Paris on my own, surviving the witch hunts we've heard about against us, fighting in the corridors of power in Beijing in the UN Decade of Women in 1995, meeting activists in Chavez's Venezuela and learning about their revolution. This and so much more is what has shaped me. It's what's kept me going and changed my perspective on the value of caring for all forms of life. I learned how important our relationships are globally and for life on this planet. For me, as a woman of colour, as a life-giving carer, I want our children, our grandchildren, our lands, the animals and the seas to survive and thrive. Working for justice, money, land and resources for all our unwaged caring work and survival work is what keeps me going. And finally, many in the campaign give leadership. Each of us bring our experiences and skills. What we learn from each other is immeasurable, and largely all thanks to Selma, who provides us with principled, anti-sexist, anti-racist perspective and gives extraordinary clarity of leadership. That makes fighting with her and for another kinder, caring world totally irresistible. It's an offer I couldn't refuse.
Thank you, Chrissy. Thank you. Okay, so this panel is made up of members of Global Women's Strike, some who have been around for decades, like myself and Crystal, and others who have joined much more recently. So I'd next like to introduce Charlotte Lee from Singapore and the UK, from the International Prostitutes Collective and the Global Women's Strike. Yeah, I think they like you to stand.
Hi everybody, and it's a bit strange talking in like a personal capacity today because I'm so used to speaking for the ECP. But so I found the centre in 2018 in my first year of university. But just to give a little background, so this was a long time ago now, but back when I was in Singapore, I first started volunteering for this quote-unquote grassroots community center committee run by a certain organization. And in the context of Singapore, over time I really came to realize that that grassroots organization was co-opted. If not, co-opted is not strong enough a word. If we were to draw, this organization was essentially a proxy for the state, a proxy for the ruling party. And at the same time, this organization was also not political. And it was community activities, but it was, making posters for community movie screenings of like Kung Fu Panda, and I just realized that this was not the right organization for me. And it had some service work in it, but in the whole history of Singapore, we've seen the infiltration and the betrayal and quashing of unions and of the movement. And that's really in the DNA of my country's history. So I won't go too much into this, but of course this first organization that I joined so long ago really didn't fit what I wanted to do. And I really didn't have the vernacular to describe it at the time, but I just knew that something wasn't right and that this wasn't the way things should be done. But then after that, I found a sex workers' rights organization in Singapore, and I felt that that was a better fit. And that's how I got into sex worker organizing. And there was some campaigning work, but as a civil society organization in Singapore, you were really up against a lot, and the odds were really stacked against you. Then I came to the UK, and I still wanted to do some volunteering somewhere. And I emailed this other sex worker org, and they said, sorry, we weren't taking anybody at the moment, but oh, you can join the ECP instead. And so I sent an email, and that was in 2018, and I came in, and Carrie was the first one that interviewed me and asked me questions. And there were volunteering sessions every Thursday where I met the other volunteers. And I remember it was like the dead of winter, and you were doing jobs like phoning up all the MPs to tell them about a new campaign, or asking them if they got our emails, because our emails had the word prostitute in them and they were all being filtered out by their filter. Yeah, but I just kept coming in on Thursdays. And then one day I just asked if they needed any help on rota, which was just answering the phone and doing the housework of the center. And then I started doing 1 day a week, and then I started doing 2 days a week. And then I got to know the people, and the people got to know me. And then I started going on the ECP Speaks, doing student workshops. And all the time when I was on rota, because you hear a lot of people going in and out, I started hearing whispers about a care income or about wages for housework. And at first, I nodded along, but I really didn't know how the pieces fit together. But the longer I was at the center, the more it made sense. And it's really difficult to really explain what the center does and the extent of it, because and its history and how we work together, and I'm still trying to grasp it. And I mean, by the end of this year, I would have written 2 dissertations about the centre, but I'm still trying to enunciate what we actually do, and I don't think that can be, summarized in a sentence. And with the connection of the centre to Wages for Housework and how it has been not represented or misrepresented in academia, partially because Selma refused to engage with it, and just simply because we were too busy doing the groundwork of campaigning. I mean, I was doing my degree at the time, and I was still up in, all this kind of like academic stuff, and my frame of reference was still very academic. And also, with the situation in Singapore, it was really hard to think outside of a charity model or a service work model. But when you actually join the campaign, you actually learn through doing it and a commitment to doing it. And I realized that a lot of the campaigning work is literally the work, such important work that needs to be done, but nobody wants to do. And I just never seen anything like the centre before in the UK, much less in Singapore, of an organisation that is grounded in their principles, that have stuck to them, and that were constantly guided by them, but was also constantly updating itself, and that was uncorrupted by capital, and it truly wanted to hold the state to account while not being the state. And I didn't think like an organisation like this was even possible, but also how, that it really resonated with me, the Wages for Housework principles. And by starting with those at the bottom, the campaign really protects everyone, and it has protected me in a range of ways I won't go into. But the nature of the centre's politics really means that it is uncompromising in our demands no matter what. And it makes the centre's position really defensible and opposed to policies, again, like from NGOs that have sold out to the state or want to become it. And so Selma said to me recently that she thought that I was the kind of person that sat back, listened to things, and then nodded at the end. And when she said that to me, I was like, I don't really think I do that. But once I started thinking about it, I realized she was right, as she often is. But that just shows that I'm a very skeptical and a very critical person by default, but also that I needed to be convinced. And the campaign to me is convincing, because to me, it is irrefutable. It never goes for low-hanging fruit or easy wins or by selling out. It is accountable to the people in the campaign and our networks, and it really fights for what we really want, because we really deserve that. And it deals with policy and structures, but at the core it also always attacks capitalism and never forgets to, and that's why I say it's so uncompromising. And that's why when I speak for the ECP or for the centre, I can do it really confidently, because the positions that we take are really irrefutable, or at least to me. And so I give thanks to all the people here and everyone that I've met at the centre, and all the people that the centre has enabled me to meet. And I often say that it's the single best thing to have come out of my time in the UK, and to think that I really stumbled onto the centre pretty much by chance. It made me realize the vast struggle and the movement building that has preceded me, and all the work that has been done, but also all the work there is to do, not out of people wanting a career out of it, because there's none to be had, but really truly working for a world that we want, and that really has to be respected. Joining the campaign means choosing a very different life for yourself, and really it astounds and delights me that the centre exists and has endured. So meeting the campaign has really changed my life. It has shaped my politics, not in a prescriptive way, but in a way that already matched mine, but while also showing me what it could be and what is possible. So, especially coming from a state where protests and campaigning are really looked down upon, I've really had to separate this part of my life from other parts of my life, especially in Singapore, just because they are just so harsh about these things. So I tell some friends, but I don't tell my parents or many people back home, because I know my mother will worry for me and nag me to no end just because she fears for my safety. But in its place, I just want to say thank you to all the people that I've met at the centre and have worked with. Thank you for caring for me. Thank you for mothering me, and I'm so glad to have found the campaign.
Thank you, Charlotte. I have to say, the moment I realised that Charlotte was really with us was when I was standing in a demonstration with Carrie in the driving rain, and I looked behind me and Charlotte was there hanging onto our banner for dear life, being buffeted around. And I thought, okay, that's it, she's one of us. Okay, so my next speaker is Sam Weinstein. He has stepped in at the last minute, thank you, because of illness from one of the other Payday men. Sam is from Payday, a network of men, and also from the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network and a union organizer from the US. I think that's diminished your role about the union organizer, but you can say more if you want.
Do I need to stand up?
Yes.
First, let me welcome the men who have come today, and just to let you know, there have always been men working with the Wages for Housework campaign from its very beginning. And I want to say, as Nikki said, I'm kind of a stand-in, so I'm kind of the reverse of some of the people here, in that I am not new to the campaign. If anything, sometimes I say that I was in the Wages for Housework campaign even before the Wages for Housework campaign existed, because I'm Selma James's son. No, I don't deserve applause for that. She deserves the applause. But I do want to say that I'm part of the Payday Men's Network. You see the banner over here, and there is a flyer, which I seem to have lost. Oh yeah, here it is, over here. And you can see some of the work that we do in the flyer. And it's an international network of men, multiracial, gay, straight, trans. We've included everybody. And that is because that's what the Wages for Housework campaign always was. And that's our campaigning with the Wages for Housework campaign has meant that we have had to be that way as well. Now, we have a slogan because it was the main thing that we worked on to begin with, which was refusing to kill or to be killed, because we worked with refuseniks and people who were rejecting the army, rejecting militarism, and rejecting what they had in store for men. And we refuse to be that. We also steal whenever we can from the Wages for Housework campaign, invest in caring, not killing. And those have been fundamental, and so that a lot of the work that we have done has been around those themes. And as Nikki said, I'm part of the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network, and I am particularly pleased whenever I can show that there are Jews in Israel who refuse the army and refuse the persecution of Palestinians. I come from a tradition of Jews who have always fought for the underdog. That's what Judaism was for me. Against the oppression. Now, we also fight, as I said, refuseniks and whistleblowers. People who come out and let it be known what's going on. And of course, there's been a long-standing campaign. We worked around the campaign for Chelsea Manning. I was in the courtroom when, at the time, he was being tried. And of course, we supported totally her demand to be allowed to be a woman in prison, which she and all of us won, because it was a victory for all of us. And a lot of the work that I have since done, since I came to the UK, has also been with prisoners. And I should say, particularly, I mean, we have always worked with the various groups in the Global Women's Strike, but particularly in relation to prisoners, with women of color, with legal action for women, and when visible, whenever necessary. And I should say a few words, because I'm trying to be short with this, since I am a stand-in, so to speak, but a few words about the fact that even though I was an early member, as I said before, Wages for Housework, the fact of Wages for Housework becoming a demand and an organizing principle really changed what I did with the rest of my life. I became a union organizer after having been opposed to the unions because I always thought they sold us out, and nothing has changed since then, but I did become a union organizer. And I used, and part of the reason that happened, frankly, because of all the protests I said about it, Selma told me to run. And that may seem strange, but we were going to use whatever we could. And that has been the guiding principle. Use whatever you can, as long as you're not screwing over some section of the working class. Some part of it. And we had a very wide definition of what the working class is. And so we held breakfasts in the inner city to win Martin Luther King's birthday as a holiday. I was a local president in Los Angeles of the Southern California Gas Company. I'm really pleased to see, by the way, that yesterday the LA City Council passed a resolution that any house built in the future in Los Angeles must not have gas. They're just ruling it out. And that has happened in a lot of other places in California, right? But we held breakfasts, and we said Martin Luther King would not stand for people having their gas turned off on his birthday, right? And that was something that we got in consultation with the Wages for Housework campaign. We got it from the Black Panther Party, right? And then we went on later, and we fought for and won the largest pay equity settlement in private industry in the United States. And again, working with the campaign and using tactics that others had not used. We even went so far that the company gave us shares, and we said fine. And I ran for the board of directors and nearly won. I mean, totally blew their mind and scared the shit out of them. Excuse my language. All of these are things that I would never have done. But one of the things I found very early on was that if I won anything in terms of conditions or pay or anything, for people of color or women or both, inevitably everybody on the property, things got better for them. It worked up. And I found that it did not work in reverse. And that was a very important lesson to learn. And so the tactics we used and the strategy we used, which was to get as much as we could for all the work that we were doing, which was fundamental to understanding the Wages for Housework campaign, all the work, your travel time, whatever. And one of the things we raised, in fact, as I was running, was, and this was really important, was we fought for a customer who had been a woman, a black woman who had been shot by the police because she hadn't paid her bill in front of her 3 and 4 and 5-year-old kids, right there in front of her. And we said, we are opposed to that. We're opposed to involving the police in the business, and it's not going to help gas company employees. And we stood with customers all along, and everything we did, whenever we did the pay equity, whatever, we always fought to involve customers and to make sure that what we did was also on the side of customers. And I was particularly pleased to note today that in today's Guardian, they actually have a long article on the fact that the Russian troops are refusing to fight. But I want to say, we are opposed, we are for all the refuseniks, but we're opposed to soldiers on either side getting killed, and for the population as a whole getting killed, kids, women, everybody. In the end, we have always found that it is more civilians that get killed than soldiers. That's what happens in war. It's not the other way around. And so we stand for that. And I want to say lastly, you know, we are delighted to endorse the care income. We know that it's mainly going to be a demand that works immediately for women. But we know that there are men who are carers, and there are men in our network who are carers, and they deserve the money too. And even more importantly than that, men have to become carers. We've got to stop being killers. We've got to become carers for everybody. That has got to be what the future of the human race is. And so we stand for pay for carers as soon as we can, now, if not immediately.
Thank you, Sam. Not bad for a standing. Okay, next speaker is Lou Njoki, who is from Kenya and the UK, from the All Africa Women's Group and Women of Colour in the Global Women's Strike.
Thank you. Thank you, Nikki, for that introduction. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of myself, my background and where I come from. But I'm not going to go into too much details because we'll be here until cows come home. Well, I grew up in a rural country in Kenya. And my parents are from, and our forefathers and mothers are from farming background. And at home, we are farmers, and most of the women are the ones that who bring the percentage of the food to the community and to feed their children and to looking after the animals and also the environment. As we go to school and we go to college, I found myself taking myself to college because my parents could not do that, because I think that era was where women were not really valued to go for further education, but I wasn't hanging around with their ideas, and I took myself to college and I learned typing, and that's what was on offer. And I got a job after that, and alongside working, I was a mother, bringing up my family and other children who were in my family who were not able to look after them. You chip in where you can, even though you are not well up yourself. So, and that's all the caring work we are talking about. And that's the wages for housework for you. Our family got food and sustained ourselves through working on the land. And most of the women who are working on the land don't own the land. And we were the ones left to look after the land itself, while men went to so-called office jobs and other jobs. But they never brought the money home. So it wasn't enough for us. We had to do what we had to do. I got a job working with the farm surveyors after my college, and I didn't get paid at the end of my era with them. So I was left penniless with children and bills to pay. I nearly became destitute, but I refused to sit back, and I started thinking other ways of looking after myself and for children. And I started thinking about how I can learn how to make crochet and making baby shows. So I was so much in love with mothers who were PG or pregnant. And that's where I got my money from. And I took myself also to learn other things that could enrich myself in terms of helping the community. At the time, I was also active in small church group, which helped people in the community. We looked after each other because we had that mentality of togetherness, and we looked at the people who were destitute, people who needed us most, and doing the contributions and visiting them, doing the cleaning. So there came a time I had to flee domestic abuse, and this is what landed me here in the UK. As you know, so many women experience this and are going through even to today. That is why I'm here, and why it is very important for me and to help and work with those who are suffering or who are in the same boat like me. I joined this campaign through a friend of mine, Susan, and I met this lady who was in detention, and I got talking to her. And she shared with me the information about the work that was involved with the women at the Crossroads Women's Center. And she told me if I needed to contact them, and I can call them. And this is the book that she asked me to ask for. And if you want to reach out to get a hold of this book, it's a self-help guide put together by Legal Action for Women based at Crossroads Women's Center. And this is something that it's a book guide that I use to help me shape up my case and face to the bullies of the Home Office. So the lady, I called the Crossroads Women's Center. Unfortunately, the women were going for Easter holiday. Boy, I was disappointed, but not really fully disappointed because it was only 2 weeks. So I waited patiently, and the lady reminded me prior to the meeting, one day before the meeting, and reminded me not to forget, tomorrow we are going to Crossroads Women's Center. Well, I looked up how to go there. I don't live in London, but I know how to navigate. So I came to the All African Women's Group. I work closely with All African Women's Group and Women Against Deportation and Women of Color. I wear different hats, yeah? So I came to the meeting. It was really a big meeting, and all the women were seated in a room like this one. And they were talking about their stories and sharing how they got there and what they are there for. And I stood up myself as well, and I remember Nikki was there, Chris was there, and Sarah, but I can't remember much of the other ones. And a woman who is not here today, her name is Shan. So I sat there and I was really getting excited. And because of, I felt like I'm home. I'm where I have always wanted to be, where women stood up and came together to speak about what they are going through and finding ways of how to help themselves and moving forward. So at the end of the meeting, I was given some leaflets, and because I realized there are other organizations, and when I looked at the other organization, I felt I want also to be involved with them because our work are similar. So I got home. I couldn't sleep. Guess what I did the following day? I came to the center uninvited. I didn't know you had to make an appointment. That's how I felt at home. So I came at the door, I knocked, I say, who is it? I say, it's Lou. And I came in, he said, do you have an appointment to see who? I said, I want to see, I was here yesterday, and I'm here now. I remembered Chris, because, you know, you won't miss her because she's taller than me. So I came, she said, we talked, whatever we talked. And there was a trip coming up that weekend to go to Wales. And I was asked whether I want to come along. And I said, oh yes, why not? I've never been to another country from here. So, I mean, in Wales, it's another country, so I get a chance to go without my passport. So I was on that trip, and the women we were with, I had not met them long ago, and we really connected, and I felt like these are my sisters. I've never, I've never met before, but now I met them. The trip was about meeting the Kurdish women. They're Turkish women, so Kurdish. And they were doing, sorry.
Switch it on, Lee.
Talk so much you wear the mic. Go easy on me. Yeah, these were Kurdish women, and there were a group of women talking also about their cases, what is happening in their life. Some of them couldn't speak English, so they had their own interpreters. And when we went there, I was able to speak to the women about this guide and how it can help them. So thanks to Legal Action for Women for putting this wonderful tool together. So from there, wow, where am I? Yeah, in Wales. Yes. Give me 1 minute. People in the campaign were not judgmental when I met them. And they didn't even, when I shared my story, they didn't go, oh, who are you? Without finding a solution or a way to help me. I've been to so many organizations and NGOs, and a lot of women here will share that. They have been approached so many other organizations, but even though it says on the paper that they can help them, they never got the help that they needed. Instead, they will just get a pat on the back and be given either a number to go and call or be given another address to go to for help, which is a shame. But here, people were willing to help you, and other women had been turned away and by other organizations, like I've said. Myself and other women in All African Women's Group work together collectively on our cases and take part in campaigning and organizing. We don't have lawyers, but we work collectively and we find lawyers who empathizes with us and who take up our cases. Because we have experienced other lawyers taking our cases and taking our money and leaving us without help. Many women in our group are mothers, they are rape survivors, and some of us are lesbian and bi. Most women in our group have been detained. One woman the other day won her case, and she told us how she resisted deportation for 9 times and went to win her case. Can you imagine that?
Good.
As well as our cases, every month we join the Support Not Separation, and this is a group based also at Crossroads Women's Center that advocates for children not being taken to being taken by social services. And we asked them to open the courts because our mothers in our group, they have been threatened with their children being taken away and being threatened deportation and leaving their children behind. Who knows better about your children than the mothers? I was very glad to organize with ECP against the murder of a Kenyan sex worker called Agnes Wanjiru. That was last year in December. And this lady was murdered by a British soldier. 13 years on, no justice has been served. And the campaign continues. This is the reason we want reparation for all Africans, and including the right to stay. They've been robbing and killing us for over 500 years, and this has to stop. I was moved by looking at the history, what the Wages for Housework had won in Beijing, counting women's unwaged work, and what they did in Nairobi. Well, to be honest, I didn't know about Nairobi, but I have always remembered Beijing. And the reason being, men were in trouble in Kenya because women had, as they were saying, they have seen the light, and they were blaming Beijing for that. They opened their eyes and they gave them the right to do what men could do. Or in some cases, they did better than what men were doing. I can tell you that even today, most of the women are the breadwinners in their community. Beijing, here we go. Thank you to this movement, because if it wasn't this, for this, your work, I don't think many women will be, have progressed very much. But thanks to all your effort, it won't go unrecognized. I joined Women of Color, Global Women Strike, an international group. I have never heard of this kind of thing when I was growing up. But at the back of my mind, I wanted to be somewhere I can be able to fight for the rights of women and the injustices they face, because I did the same. Wages for Housework made sense to me. The background I come from, seeing how hard women work and the hours we put in, from when we get up till the time we go to sleep, it's 24/7. We should be billionaires by now. You know, I used to think it's only when you work so hard, physical work, that you become a millionaire or billionaire, but that's not it. We are the billionaires. Having wages for this, for housework, this work would make a lot of difference. And having money on our hands and being paid for what we do, that will make us billionaires. And we'll be empowered and know we can do what we want to do with our money. That would change the perception of women as less and unvalued, and men feeling they have power over us and the right to do violence to us. That would end. Societies would change, and the women and men could live more in harmony. The good thing is that women are fighting back today, and the movements are coming together like the Black Lives Matters. In fact, those days people used to think, oh, I'm fighting my corner. But when the Black Lives Matters came, everybody joined together, and up to today the movement is growing stronger. I've learned you can't separate yourself from other sections and movements, and how important it is to join others fighting for the same things. That is where autonomy kicks in. This became clear to me when I read the recently released Our Time Is Now, and I urge you to read that book, and it's available there today. I love the organizing work I do. It shows something can always be done, and there is hope for everybody, starting with those of us with least. And I thank you all, Crossroads Women's Center. I didn't have a sister here. I didn't have a relative here, but now I have loads of relatives. I have so many sisters, and they got my back. And boy, oh boy, I got your back. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. Very lovely. Okay, so our next speaker is Maggie Ronin from Global Women's Strike in Ireland. She's also based at the National University of Ireland in Galway and is a trade unionist.
Thank you. So I first met the campaign in 2000, which was the year of the first global women's strike on March the 8th. I just moved to Galway in the west of Ireland, and I saw that Margaretta Darcy, who Selma mentioned earlier, our distinguished friend and movement colleague, she was organising an event for International Women's Day, a strike by women to demand recognition and payment for all our unwaged caring work. So I immediately thought, that's for me. And what also appealed to me was that it was clearly a demand related directly to my own background, coming from the working class, and clearly anti-racist. The publicity about the event said that traveller women and women seeking asylum would be participating, and I wanted to be with them. Margaretta introduced me to Selma and Nina from the Wages for Housework campaign that summer, and I was hooked straight away. When I first heard of Wages for Housework, I immediately thought of my mother. I grew up in rural Ireland on welfare, actually on my father's disability welfare, and my mother worked full-time in the home. I saw my mother's constant stress, trying to make ends meet, constant worry about what would happen to us. It was just obvious and practical, the difference that Wages for Housework, or what we now call a care income, would have meant to her and our whole family. Being in the campaign has really changed me for the better as her daughter and as carer for her. She was delighted with the idea of Wages for Housework and felt able to talk to me about all of her caring work, not only for us children, but for her parents, sisters and brother growing up on the land. The campaign has been a huge support to me with advice, healthcare, or just making the time for it, when I have worked to care for her as she fought cancer and as she now lives with dementia. This is something that really distinguishes our campaign. It's a very caring, very healing place. Something I've definitely not found to be the case with my employer or other organisations, who my most recent experience being with trade unions. Another thing I found with the campaign, it really allows you to see things in a different way. For example, prior to meeting the campaign, I had read feminist works about the dominance of the Catholic Church in Ireland at the time the Irish Constitution was written, and therefore the sexist language in it on women's place in the home. It refers to women's place in the home. So I generally went along with that and hadn't paid close attention. But in 2005, when an attempt was made to abolish this wording, I now realised that this was a really important statement about valuing women's caring work, and it even referred to economic support for it. Ever since, we've fought successfully to keep this in the Constitution. I have to say I've been working with Nina in particular on that, amending the outdated wording and strengthening it, and that struggle is continuing. The campaign also gives you a real education in the hierarchies there are in the capitalist society, while at the same time providing a practical way in which we can come together across sectors, across those hierarchies, through the autonomy of each sector. So I have a wage job. As I've said, I work at a university as an academic, while also caring for my mother on top of that. Many of us are doing this double day. So the struggles of those of us in waged work are also central to our campaign. And wages for housework, or the care income, would also lift us up. Because there's really no recognition by the employer that you might need time and support, including financial support for caring. In fact, we're often discriminated against in pay and pensions because we've taken the time to care, impoverished for caring. A few years ago, we started a campaign at my university to fight back, organising through the union, but with a huge amount of help and support from the Global Women's Strike, and in particular from Sam Weinstein from Payday Men's Network. The spark was a legal victory by one woman academic which uncovered how women's work to care for our families was used to discriminate against us. Some of the academics wanted to focus on how women were not getting the top jobs as senior lecturers and professors. But guided by the campaign's focus on the wage hierarchy, we said we need to begin with those who are at the bottom. We used the publicity that this case got to shine a light on all the other pay inequity that women were facing, with both our unwaged caring and in the low-paid caring jobs that are mostly done by women. At the university, it's from cleaners to administrators to staff on insecure teaching contracts. It sparked a national movement, and we've won many victories, including pay increases. Being in the campaign has also made a huge difference to the work I have been able to do as an academic, really changing my perspective and allowing me to see what is possible. So when I went to the first Global Women's Strike event, I was actually looking for the grassroots women's movement, because as someone who had just gotten this big academic job at the university, I needed something to hold on to. And I needed the movement to hold on to me. A few weeks and months into the job, and I realised the huge pressure in every committee meeting, in all aspects of the job really, to do the work of the state against the community that I come from. To stay silent when you should speak up, to prioritise research and teaching that at best was no use to grassroots communities, and more often than not, was undermining or downright destructive. I realised that I could easily be crushed as one lone individual trying to hold the line, trying to stand up to this. And the perspective on accountability and autonomy in our campaign was exactly what I was looking for, providing another standard and huge clarity on what work from someone in my position would be useful to the grassroots. But so much more than that. The campaign always has my back. I was not alone. I was part of a global network of women and men who, in its many sectors, has supported me, is there to consult and put our heads together to work out a way through. What a relief! And a truly liberating and exciting way to work. As an academic, I have to say it made me very happy that the campaign is not academic in the least, not abstract, but instead immediate and practical. I'll end with one example of this. My particular area as an academic is archaeology. I'm an archaeologist, and just before I met the campaign, I had started to research the destructive impacts of mega development projects, in this case hydroelectric dams and reservoirs, on both archaeological sites and communities, particularly in the global south. As a way to make archaeology useful and counteract its use to steal indigenous lands and justify all sorts of violence. I realised, with a great deal of help from Selma in particular, who provided that so needed clarity, that I needed to start with the grassroots women directly affected by these dams and their caring work for the survival of everyone, and use my expertise and position to support them and the whole community, making the case for archaeology to save archaeological sites together with the community's case, making both cases together rather than separating them and undermining people. So I learned to watch out for and negotiate the apparent conflict of interest between my professional interest as an academic and that of the grassroots. And the campaign also gave me the strength to be bold and to forge ahead when other professionals, archaeologists and academics, but also those in some NGOs, said that this wasn't archaeology. It wasn't objective because I was taking sides. Or this type of thing shouldn't be taught to students. Or women's work and demands were not relevant to books and reports on the dam's impacts. Our work helped to defeat a key dam in southeast Turkey or North Kurdistan on 3 separate occasions. The work has been cited as an approach to follow by archaeologists and communities who have successfully scrapped mega development projects elsewhere, and it was used to set a standard by the largest global organisation of archaeologists for accountable archaeological work with indigenous communities. I say our because this is collective work, and I could not have done any of this without the campaign. And I just want to end by saying thank you to all my sisters and brothers in the campaign for everything, but also for this opportunity to speak on this fantastic panel today. Thank you.
Okay, last but in no way least is Liz Hilton from Global Women's Strike Thailand and originally from Australia. Been here with us for a month and we've learned a lot from Liz, as always. Liz is from Empower, the sex workers collective based in Chiang Mai in Thailand, and from the Women Human Rights Defenders Collective.
Thanks, Nikki. Well, I haven't got anything left to say because people said a lot. That's great. So it's the 50th anniversary, so it's the Golden Jubilee. And I like the idea it's a Golden Jubilee because it's got gold in it. Means like the money must be following soon. My experience of coming to be part of the Global Women's Strike Campaign is a little different to everyone else's because I didn't come as an individual. I have been part of Empower, which is the sex worker organization, as Nikki said, in Thailand. Empower was started 36 years ago by sex workers and a Thai woman by the name of Pinoy or Chetamipa Apisu. So I've been part of Empower in Thailand for 30 years now. And for Empower, some of the things that have been part of the way we've been organizing is that there's a very strong value on self-organizing. There's the accountability to each other and to the sex workers of Thailand as sex workers, as women and as mothers. We have to be accountable to that small things matter. The small things matter when you're organizing, and money matters. It always matters everywhere. We have a long history of not accepting defeat and keeping moving. So even sometimes we're forced to move sideways, but we never go backwards. We're always moving. We may sidestep a little like this. And we try to make the invisible visible and to be seen and be heard. And we have 36 years of learning by doing, which sometimes means learning by doing the wrong thing, but it's still learning by doing. So in 2015, the English Collective of Prostitutes, ECP, invited Empower to come and speak at their symposium at the Parliament on Decriminalisation and to join the International Global Women's Strike Conference a few days later or a week later. And I was the one to come. And when I got here, who did I meet and what did I see? I met a group of women and some men who used plain English. They talk in plain English, not jargonese. We call it jargonese. The language of gender equality and the development that's just it sanitizes what everybody's talking about. So the first thing I found at the centre was everyone there was speaking plain English. And Selma James didn't come from the halls of Oxford or Cambridge. She'd come from the factory floor, she'd come from the movement, and what she said made sense. At least most of the time you make sense. And sometimes when she doesn't make sense, it's usually because I can't keep up. Yeah. So it's always exciting when she doesn't make sense as well. I think too the physical layout of the Crossroads Centre for anyone that's for anyone that's been there, it really reflects the openness and the overlap between all the organisations in the campaign. So what I saw were organisations spilling into each other, and I looked and thought, why haven't we never done this in Thailand? Why are we all in different boxes around the city and the country? Of course, people campaigning together should be together. I remember that quite struck me at the time. And then the organising that went on around me and with me for the international strike campaign gave me a good idea of what people in the campaign stood for, or what the organisations and the individual women and men in the campaign stood for, because often what people do and how they do it shows you who they are and what they stand for. It's not about their glossy papers or nice words. You can see by how they do it and what they do. And I saw that there was no one was positioned above, am I right? Yes. Okay. No one was positioned above anyone else. There was no piece of work that had more value than another. There was an expectation that we would all do what needed to be doing, and that we all were capable of doing that together. Excuse me. So the way the campaign worked and the way that everybody interacted was very familiar to me, because this is in many ways the way that Empower works as well. So I felt like we were more like two rivers coming together. I was like, oh yes, I know how this goes. But it was the first time that I'd ever heard about organising around wages for housework, which is now the care income. And for us in Thailand, prior to this, we were all like, we were trying to unpick a tapestry, and we're all trying to madly unpick different corners, and sometimes help each other, but mainly focusing on what we were doing. And Selma and the campaign just flipped the whole cloth upside down. And if we all pull on this one stitch together, the whole thing may come undone. Yeah. And I almost, I almost laughed out loud, because it was such a simple, obvious, needed and possible thing to do, to campaign for a care income. So I was sold pretty well immediately. But as I said, I'm not as an individual. So I went back to Thailand and I talked to the sex workers of Empower about the people I'd met and the care income campaign. And most women immediately saw the same as felt the same as I did. Some took longer to work out, is caring for family your traditional duty, or is it work you should be given an income for? They didn't think long. No? As one of the women might put it, that why should a mother have to leave her kids, pay to leave her kids somewhere in order to go and look after someone else's kids to earn the money she needed to take care of her own. And so therefore, the whole thing doesn't make sense as it works now, so let's change it. At that time, the other thing that we saw, and we've always, as a Empower, we're always trying to find people to stand with. And in 2014, we had a military coup. Excuse me. And this military coup allowed us to see who else was standing, because the glossy NGOs and the career people all retreated in the face of the guns. The women that were left were women who were fighting, where retreat is not an option. You have to keep going till you win. So what we found is different women that now become the collective, women's collective in Thailand. Can you hear my voice shaking?
No.
Okay, I can. So we formed the Women's Collective in Thailand. I'll just say who we are a little bit now. So it's community women fighting mining, mega dams, power plants that are destroying life, livelihood, and the planet. Women fighting to reclaim their farming land from palm oil companies, reclaim the forest, that's their pantry and their medicine cabinet. They're fighting to resist eviction from the slums, refugee women resisting being handed back over to men with guns, garment workers, street vendors, sex workers, migrant workers, fighting against the exploitation in the market. And everyone's fighting to defend and care for their family, community, and the planet. So this is who we're, and also against poverty and against inequality. So these are the groups of women, the groups of communities who we found together. And some of the inspiration and the motivation to find each other did come from what we saw as the Global Women's Strike organising. And at the moment, I just say at the moment, women from all of those communities are on their 6th day of protest in the streets of Bangkok. And because we know that organising together is powerful, and one of the ways we know that is because the governments everywhere are really intent to keep us apart. Yes. So Thai government is trying to pass a law that will limit association with each other. And so our collective, along with a lot of other people, are standing against that now. And when the collective, when we talked about organising and the commonality that we have in organising around care and around the care income, I remember that our care income for our collective could be hard cash. Cash is always good, no? But it could be 6 acres of land, which is enough to grow food for one family. The other things they said, secure housing, the right to care for and live in the forest, the return of the river, care income, the details can be worked out later. We'll get it and then we'll see what forms it could be in. But it gives the scope for women to imagine what is needed to make life secure.
Yes.
So, the one crucial factor of Empower becoming part of the Global Women's Strike, in joining the Global Women's Strike, there was no expectation that Empower had to become the Global Women's Strike. We're very much still allowed to be Empower. That means to me, and the other people have touched on it, using the word autonomy, and I think we need to read again the chapter on autonomy in your book, but it's part of that if joining the global women's strike meant that Empower was no longer independent, then we couldn't join. The fact that we felt not just able to stay as Empower, but also that was, people were happy for us to stay as that, which I think is the autonomous, the importance of autonomy for all of our groups in our collective as well. So the Global Women's Strike is an international campaign, and for us, many organisations and networks around the world have international in their name. And often that just means putting a photo of a black woman fetching water or an Asian woman collecting rice on their lovely poster or calendar. And we feel like often we're just as colour and spice or decoration, or sometimes to give them some credibility. Whereas the Global Women's Strike International actually mean it. Yeah. And that's affected my life a lot because it's a lot of hard work to be international. No? It's not easy and it takes work. And we have to work around many things. We start with time zones. Now, and we can't even blame the Tories or any other force of evil for the time zones. It's a thing. We can't campaign against time zones. We just have to live with it. We have to find ways to understand each other in Thai, Spanish, English, and not just English. It's English with an Argentinian accent. English with an American, Canadian, and Australian, I forgot myself. And beyond language, because language can kind of be overcome a little. We have to do the work of understanding the differences and the similarities between us. So how is your capitalism play out differently to ours? What are our laws, our movements? How are we different? How are we the same? And it's very hard to articulate the things you've never had to explain before.
Yes.
So especially those things that are just normal. And they're not normal once you move to another country. So it's very hard to articulate what our experience is and what our vision is, what our demands are together. That takes work, and it's ongoing work. Recently, we did one piece of work together to create the What Mothers and Other Carers Want survey. So this international survey we launched on the March the 8th, and it's asking mothers and other carers in as many countries as we can, what do you want? Is childcare and the right to work enough, or is there more that you want? What would you think of a care income? And I know you've all taken it, or you will. We're using it in Thailand. It's really useful as a tool to be discussing care work that women do together and to discuss the possibilities and the ideas of a care income. So it's not just the answers that we will get, but it is the process of asking each other and developing questions that make sense in California and make sense in Chiang Mai, Thailand is not easy. It takes work to understand each other. And that's the commitment to being international that the Global Women's Strike makes. It's not just a slogan or a logo, although I have one. I think that it does take a commitment to each other, a big responsibility to each other, but it's also absolutely necessary because we're not going to win if we don't win together, really. Yeah. So being part of the Global Women's Strike is a power for us, and so it's a power for everyone. I chose, my t-shirt. I chose to wear this t-shirt today, so we made this at Empower Up maybe 20 years ago, and it says, the power we share, the power we have. And I think that would be my final word for my piece, because I think that it's about combining power to have more power.
Okay, that was really, really fantastic, but I'm afraid I've got really bad news, which is that we've really seriously run over time. I'm so sorry, because I look out, no, not you, it's me. I hope you agreed with the decision to allow all the speakers their full time, but it does mean that, unusually for us, we don't have time for discussion. I'm very sorry about that.
Just 2 minutes, come on, 2 quick.
Okay, I want to, first of all, you know that's going to end badly, don't you, if I say 2 minutes discussion.
5 minutes altogether, yes.
Anne?
Okay, Fran from Bishopsgate said as long as we're completely out by 4:30 it's okay.
Okay, perfect. All right, we'll have dismantling. Okay, can we dismantle in 15 minutes so we can have 15 minutes discussion? Yes. Okay. All right, lovely. I can see this audience. I mean, I was feeling very, sad about not having a discussion, because I can see the audience is a group of very interesting people who I'm sure will have questions. I know some people have come from out of town as well, the women from Hull, Kalechi here, so thank you for that. So please, questions?
Or comments?
Or comments?
We gave perfect satisfaction.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say I think all the speakers did absolutely amazing.
Stand up. Say who you are, Susie.
Yeah, really.
You stand.
Hi, I'm Susie from An Untold Story in Hull. I'd just like to say thank you all very much for your input and insight. It's really interesting. Thank you.
Okay, stand into silence.
Yes.
Is there another mic?
I've got a mic here, I just don't know if it works.
There's lots of mics, but no questions.
Yes, they do.
Okay, Emma at the back.
Yeah, okay, what Susie said is really humbling and very humbling and moving, and thank you for all of your stories, and it's really helpful to hear some echoes of what we're scratching the surface with. We've been going 5 years in Hull, so really, really important to touch this here now. Anyway, I'm fascinated by how many times the word clarity came up today, and also the analogy of the pimp process in when other organisations and stuff can get involved with what you do, and the echo with our experience in that. But I really want to just ask a bit more about the clarity thing and how Selma has been an agent of clarity, because I feel like that's so critical, and so if there's any more that anyone could say about that, more wisdom.
Emma, could you just say a sentence or two about what your work is in Hull?
Hi, my name's Amanda, part of An Untold Story Voices. Me and Susie are ex-street prostitutes, and we fight for the women in Hull to not be prosecuted by local council. We won a case with them, and this is just totally inspiring because everybody's coming together, and we haven't been going long, but we realise that we need allies, we need to speak as one voice, and today has been inspiring, and just keeping going with the campaigning is just, I'm exhausted just after a few years, so I don't know how exhausted you are after a few decades, so thank you so much for fighting so hard for all of us, because women are women, there is no distinction between each of us, so thank you so much for today and for everything you've done over the past 50 years. I really appreciate it, thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Okay, I'd just like to say, we don't feel tired. I mean, sometimes we're tired, but we don't feel tired. And one of the reasons is because there are, different autonomous organisations working together so that even if you are having a bad time and getting defeated at one moment in time, somebody else is winning, and that's what keeps us going. So we don't burn out in the same way as some people in other organisations do. And I think that one of the things that people often comment on, others will comment on the clarity, but one of the things that people always say after Selma speaks is that what's really encouraging is the perspective of winning. Really, really feeling like you can absolutely win, and that really keeps you going, and it definitely helps deal with the tiredness. So, clarity.
I think Liz actually said it too. I know you didn't use the word clarity, but what I think you did was define the fact that Selma, in the information, in all the publications that I've read, doesn't use jargon, doesn't mystify the question or the answer. And that I haven't read too many. First of all, I don't read a lot of women's feminist stuff. But if Selma writes something, I read it. And I think that it's a big difference if you're not somebody who's kind of grown up reading. Like, I was never an academic. I never wanted to read much, because what I did read, the history I got taught at school, was a load of crap. I mean, I went to school when half the world was pink. And it meant nothing to me when you don't even find out what happened in the country that your father was from, never mind what your mother's country was like. So reading was never my big thing. But when I have read Selma's work, I have found a clarity in it. I've highlighted things that stay with me, things that I then can plagiarize or use or borrow or tell others, to try to explain what we feel about a whole set of issues. And it is everything about our lives, all of the issues. It's not separated off or boxed off. And I think that's the clarity I experienced.
A couple of other questions or comments.
I'm Khadija Roof. I've come over from Oxfordshire today.
She is a poet.
Thank you very much. I wasn't expecting that. I'm so delighted to be here. Selma James is one of my all-time heroes. I'm a bit of a fangirl, I'm afraid. And I have written a collection of poems that are dedicated really to the movement. It's in a collection. That's gone on. It's called Housework, and all the proceeds are going to the movement. I came along, it's easy to feel depleted at the moment. There's so much kind of bad news and everything's so wearing. And I came along hoping to feel inspired and energised, and I go away completely satisfied. You're going to have to add Scouse to the list of accents. Thank you. And I couldn't come along, if it's all right, I couldn't come along and not read the poem that I wrote for Selma, so I hope that's okay.
Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. For Selma James. Why were women so angry with Selma James? All she said was, imagine if housework were paid. They say she burned with strange fever. Classy women rolled their eyes when she spoke. They dismissed her. This work done for love, somehow discounted, not seen as toil, but viewed as a role, accompanied by bluebirds and a soprano, maybe a rainbow, but no pot of gold. I'll wager, if housework were noted, more women could choose and caring would have currency, not be taken for granted. Maybe men might respect the share, and those with less wouldn't need to clean middle-class houses ahead of their own. We hold half of heaven. We could speak in voices. Take time owing.
today.
Should only be read in a Scouse accent.
Yeah, Scouse accent's really good. Okay, are there any other comments? I wanted to say something about clarity. I'm glad you asked about it, Emma, because I feel it's something I feel strongly about as well, because it's very satisfying when somebody helps you with clarity. And I think that I think there's a number of things about it. One is that I think Selma listens very carefully to what people are saying and then actually helps us articulate our own experience. It's a bit like, you know, that satisfaction when somebody really puts their finger on what you're trying to express, which is really helpful. But I think also, in all the campaigns based at the Women's Centre, what Selma has brought is a class perspective, and that really helps you work out which side you're on every issue. And in a certain point, it becomes a habit, and you can apply it to kind of every circumstance, you know, whether it's, I don't know, the war on Ukraine or whatever it is, you know, you start to develop an instinct as to when there's something fishy, or, you know, when things are not quite as they seem. And I think that's very helpful. And I think also it's the combination of a number of principles as well, you know, that have been well established, like the one that you mentioned about being, the whole question of being co-opted, which is a really, really massive movement issue. It's everywhere, and it's, you know, you kind of are organising your struggle on sex worker rights, and you see it happening there, and you think, oh, maybe it's only there, and then you go and look at what's happening with asylum, and you see it exactly happening there. You know, so it's really across the board, and it's one of those crucial issues that demobilises people and destroys organisations and campaigns. And so having clarity on those kind of issues, being able to see when it's happened and get help to work out what to do so that you build your strength around you to deal with things like that, I think that's really, it's very much a kind of a really concrete organising principle and activity. So I'm glad you asked about it. Thank you. Okay, Kelechi has it.
I think clarity also comes from the fact that we never invite, no, I don't want to get up if you don't mind, that we never invited experts to speak to our meetings unless they were organizing meetings and we needed some technical stuff. So we would have panels of members who would talk about their experiences so that everything we thought about would be expressed in plain English, or maybe other languages in other countries, but it was plain. We never elevated jargon or respected it. We never respected it, really. And when they jargonized, we turned our backs. We were determined that the people who spoke to us and for us was us. And that's helped me greatly to be clear. I also tried to be clear. I worked at it.
Yeah, thank you. Can somebody pass that to Collection?
Thank you. Hi everyone. It's been like I was really touched by your story, and there's something Selma said on Thursday during as the Zoom meeting. She said our consciousness is gained through our struggle. I don't know if you remember, you said it during our meeting on Thursday, and that really went into me, you know, just like she was saying that you burn out through activism. I've been a victim of that. I did activism combined with my university, and my health, I was burnt out. But there was something that pushed me, was, you know, something, there's an adage in my country that says, if you're crying that you don't have shoes to wear, and you come outside and see another person that he has shoes to wear, but does not have a leg to wear the shoes. You know, I came out when I started my activism and I was burnt out. I attended a conference and that in Bristol, and I went to that conference. I saw people that were worse than me, and they were talking about, they were in the panel, they were talking, and the work they were doing in Bristol and all over, and in Canada, and I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? I should be, I can use my hands. I should be doing more than them. You know, that is it. That's what I understand from that. Consciousness is led from us, from during our struggle, and that defines our determination, that defines our activism. You know, yes, we can burn out. Yes, it's time to apply self-care, but don't forget, all I see in activism is don't be selfish. Activism does not welcome selfishness. You fight for people. That's what we all come. If you don't want to fight for people, you better sit down. But if you want to fight for people, you stand up and you fight. Not thinking of yourself, but thinking of the person that doesn't have legs but has shoes to wear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, did you get that?
I just wanted to thank the panel. It was such a fabulous panel. And I wanted to just pick up on the point that yesterday some young people of color invited us to an event. And the woman I talked to on the phone, she was struggling. She was talking about autonomy and separatism, but it was so jumbled up that it didn't make any sense. And you can see that people are struggling, and you feel like a meeting like this and the campaign is real clarity. It's urgently needed. It almost needs to be bottled or go on a road show because people are really struggling. And anyway, it was really useful because now from today I feel like I know how to go back and talk to the woman again and lay out some issues and see how we can work together. And then I wanted to say about winning, that what Selma's done with the Wages for Housework campaign is not only say you can win, but when she talks about wages for housework, you realize how we have won, and that we're here because of the unwaged work that our mothers and foremothers did. You know, we survived because of that unwaged work. And you know, some of us are descendants of slaves, and we walk tall. That's part of our legacy. So I feel like that's a great gift that Selma's given us. I'll stop there, but I just wanted to thank everybody. I thought Liz's presentation was great and clear and simple and helps us. And Selma's, what Selma does is make the obvious clear. You know, the basics, the fundamentals, and we desperately need that, and we use it to fight. So thank you.
Okay, sorry, and now they want me to wind up. Okay, thank you very much everyone for coming. I'd just like to thank again the Bishopsgate Institute for hosting us. I'd like to thank Kay and others from the Kay who coordinates the work at the centre and others at the centre for putting together this event. Of course it was a team effort. I think it was your idea, Nina, to have this kind of panel. I think we originally said it was going to be the first of two, and maybe we can go back to that idea, and so there'll be a follow-on which you'll all get to know about. So thank you very much for a very lovely event. Thank you. Thank you.